This is the story of how a crew of outcast teenagers from one of the roughest neighborhoods in Los Angeles took a stiff, upright hobby and turned it into an act of rebellion. Before the Z-Boys, skateboarding looked like ballet. After them, it looked like a fight. This is how attitude, not just technique, became the defining force in skateboarding history. In the early 1970s, the stretch of coastline between Venice and Santa Monica, California, was known locally as Dogtown, a nickname that carried none of the glamour associated with Southern California surf culture. It was run down, poor, and largely ignored by the rest of the city, a decaying amusement pier and crumbling storefronts standing in for what had once been a thriving beachfront community. The kids who grew up there didn't have the polished, sun-soaked surfing lifestyle that outsiders associated with California. What they had was attitude and a fierce territorial pride in a neighborhood most people wrote off. Out of this environment came the Zephyr Skate team, sponsored by a surf shop run by Jeff Ho, Skip Engblom, and Craig Stiesick. The Z-Boys, as they became known, were mostly surfers first, kids who skated because there weren't always waves to ride. But they brought a surfer's aggression and a Dogtown kid's chip-on-the-shoulder attitude to skateboarding, a sport that up until that point had almost nothing to do with either. To understand how radical the Z-Boys were, it helps to understand what skateboarding looked like before them. Through the late 1960s and early 1970s, competitive skateboarding was dominated by freestyle, a discipline built around smooth choreographed routines performed upright, almost gymnastic in style. It was technical, sure, but it was also polished, controlled, and visually closer to figure skating than anything resembling rebellion. The Z-Boys rejected that entirely. Instead of standing upright and performing clean, isolated tricks, they rode low to the ground, aggressive and loose, treating the pavement the way they treated a wave, something to be attacked, carved hard, ridden on the edge of control. This wasn't a stylistic preference, it was a direct challenge to the establishment's idea of what skateboarding was supposed to look like, and it made a lot of people in the existing skate scene deeply uncomfortable. The Z-Boys' rebellious style might have stayed a regional curiosity if not for a single event in 1975, the Del Mar National Skateboard Championships. Most competitors showed up expecting the usual freestyle routines. The Z-Boys showed up looking like they'd rolled straight off the street, ripped clothes, no uniforms, and a riding style built entirely around raw aggression rather than polish. Photographers Craig Stiesick and Glenn E. Friedman documented the team obsessively, and the images that came out of that period, gritty, low angle, full of attitude, became as influential as the skating itself. Del Mar wasn't just a competition, it was a public declaration that skateboarding could be dangerous, aggressive, and cool in a completely different way than anyone had previously imagined. The Z-Boys didn't just win over judges, they won over an entire generation of skaters who'd been waiting, without knowing it, for permission to skate angry instead of skating pretty. What sealed the Z-Boys' legacy was their discovery of drained swimming pools during California's severe mid-1970s drought. Homeowners across Los Angeles emptied their backyard pools to save water, and the Z-Boys treated every empty pool they could find as an invitation. Riders like Tony Alva, Jay Adams, and Stacy Peralta pushed pool riding to genuinely dangerous extremes, carving higher and higher up curved concrete walls, eventually breaking the vertical plane entirely and launching themselves airborne. This wasn't cautious experimentation, it was confrontational by nature, trespassing on private property, riding surfaces never designed to be skated, treating danger as part of the appeal rather than something to avoid. The pool riding era of Dogtown skating fused the punk ethos of do-it-yourself, answer to no one, directly onto the sport's physical technique. Skating vertical, aggressive lines up curved concrete became both a technical achievement and a statement of defiance. Success inevitably put pressure on the Z-Boys' unity. As individual riders like Tony Alva and Stacy Peralta became recognizable stars in their own right, the collective identity that had defined the Zephyr team began fragmenting. Sponsorship offers came in for individuals rather than the team. Rivalries emerged between riders who'd grown up together as equals but now found themselves competing for attention, sponsorship money, and cultural credit for a movement they'd built together. By the late 1970s, the Zephyr team had effectively dissolved, its riders scattering into their own careers, brands, and in some cases open conflict over who deserved credit for what the team had accomplished. In a strange way, this fracturing was itself consistent with the punk attitude the Z-Boys had brought to skateboarding in the first place. Fiercely individualistic, resistant to structure, unwilling to stay contained inside any single identity for long, even one they had created themselves. Even as the Zephyr team fell apart, the attitude it introduced didn't disappear, it spread. The aggressive, low-to-the-ground riding style became the default vocabulary for an entire generation of skaters who never even met the original Z-Boys. Vert skating, which grew directly out of the pool riding techniques pioneered in Dogtown, dominated the sport through the late 1970s and into the 1980s. The rebellious anti-establishment posture the Z-Boys brought to competition became the baseline attitude of skate culture itself, eventually merging with the growing punk rock scene into a single, inseparable identity. What the Z-Boys ultimately proved wasn't just that skateboarding could look different. It was that skateboarding could feel different, that a sport could be an act of defiance as much as an athletic pursuit, and that raw, unpolished aggression could be more compelling to watch than technical perfection. That idea, more than any specific trick or riding technique, is the Z-Boys' real legacy. The Z-Boys didn't invent skateboarding, and they weren't the first people to ride an empty pool. What they invented was an attitude, a way of treating a piece of wood on wheels as an extension of neighborhood pride, teenage rebellion, and raw physical aggression. They took a sport that looked like ballet and made it look like a fight, and skateboarding has never gone back to looking like ballet since. From the cracked sidewalks of a forgotten stretch of Los Angeles coastline came a style that would define the sport for the next 50 years. Proof that sometimes the most important innovation isn't a new trick, it's a new attitude.